Today, YouTube, we are covering World War II because the boys are ready to learn some knowledge. That's right. And during this, we'll be hitting a lot of atrocities and a lot of scary topics. So if you're somebody who's a little bit more faint of heart, we are talking about war and one of the larger wars in the entire world. So just a heads up as a little bit of a trigger warning for things that will be talked about in this. And let's get straight into it. Before we get started, you know the vibes. The like button, subscribe button, leave a comment down below to feed the algorithm quad. And let's get into it. The code word for today, so we know did not skip this intro, is...
World?
World is a good one. Let's do world.
Yeah, that's a great one. Love that.
All right, here we go. Ready?
Here we go.
Woo! It's
Skillshare.
A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy to Switzerland to avoid military service. He gets big into socialism, working for trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a
Us going straight to Mussolini was like whiplash. They are speeding this. Oh my god.
violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police, so he gets arrested, sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again,
He keeps doing it, bro.
again, completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he finally returns to work as an avid socialist. His speeches and journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists. He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested. Then World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought, wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution everywhere. And suddenly he was pro-war, but his fellow socialists didn't like his new pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what, I'm done with socialism. We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian peoples just like the days of the Roman Empire. I'll call it fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation.
So, two things. Do you know anything about the Roman Empire and its fall?
Not its fall, no. Only their greatness, really. I don't really know how they ended.
Okay, no problem. We'll go through it at some point. Do you know anything about fascism?
No.
Do you notice that he said fascismo, which is he's creating fascism right now?
This is the origin.
Well, I mean, fascism technically does exist. The terminology, definitely comes from here.
Okay.
But definitely fascism exists way before this as well.
What's fascism?
Well, my dear friend, let me go back and hit play again. Ready?
New pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what? I'm done with socialism. We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian peoples just like the days of the Roman Empire. I'll call it fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. That's all well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you?
Bold. Damn. Oh, nah, he looked crazy. Kind of looks like a mobster.
Italy had been on the winner's side in World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end, they only got a little, and they felt cheated. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that the Italian people were a little unhappy. So when Mussolini came along and said that he could fix everything, his fascist movement gained a lot of support. In 1922, he went to the king and said, make me prime minister, or I'll make me prime minister. And the king said, you are this army.
Wow, fair.
Then he went about establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had its first fascist dictator. Next up, Germany. Germany had...
That's the reason why when I was like, oh my god, they're going straight into Mussolini. This is like whiplash. This is so fast. It's because I was like, oh shit. They're going from bare bones Mussolini to, okay, yep.
been on the loser's side, and they got absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of Versailles. They lost territory, had to demilitarize the Rhineland, had to reduce their army to just 100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it didn't have, and a new rule was established that every Englishman withheld the right to walk into the center of Berlin, pick out any German they wanted, and spank the hell out of them. I made that last one up, but it helps you understand how all this felt to Germans.
Not real. Okay.
A bad economy and weak governments meant that when a small angry man with a silly mustache came along and said that he could fix everything, the German people loved it. Hitler had been a soldier during World War I, and he was crazy patriotic, and nobody was madder than him about Germany's humiliation. He helped start a new political party, and in 1920...
So one of the things about Hitler in particular was that he was a very loud and outspoken spokesperson. And one of the things that made him very iconic was that he would literally stand on, you know how people talk about, oh, you're standing on your soapbox right now, that type of thing? Because he would literally stand on crates and boxes originally in bars and pubs and would preach about nationalism. And people were filled with so much hatred at the time. Originally, originally thought he was just a crazy dude. And they'd be like, oh man, look at this crazy guy yelling. It's kind of entertainment. As it built and built throughout time, and not that slowly, pretty rapidly, he was getting a larger and larger audience of people who actually felt what he felt, which was Germany needed to regain its identity and nationalism, right? So it's like he took the discouragement of others and tried to unify in a very hostile way, masked as being patriotic.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
they could definitely get behind him compared to the fact that he served and everything.
Yeah.
And he's like, can be consistently preaching it as well.
23 attempted a march on Munich with his boys. And then he got arrested. But his popularity grew and grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destined savior, and he went full megalomaniac, establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had fascist dictator number 2. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas, but more importantly, they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be friends? Franco? No? You good? I do. Who's that? It's Japan, and they've taken over northern China. Let's rewind a bit.
So, do you know anything about Japan during this time?
No.
I know they did fucked up shit, right?
Oh, yeah, they did.
Like crazy fucked up shit.
Like what?
Yeah.
Oh, he
Oh,
might say in the video. If he doesn't say.
yeah, we'll see if he says it. If he doesn't, I don't know how much I can actually say
Why?
without us getting demonetized.
Oh,
cut it
just change the wording.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that, yeah.
Japan had isolated itself from the rest of the world for over 200 years until the Americans showed up and said, you're going to trade with us and you're going to like it. Then the Western powers imposed a bunch of unequal treaties, meaning Japan's economy was bust. They also had no natural resources, so they decided to go get some. They went to war with China to gain a sphere of influence over Korea, and they took a bunch of China's stuff. But then the West said, hey, cut that out. And since Japan couldn't take on the West, they said, okay, I guess we'll just go home. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Taking advantage of a weakened China and setting up spheres of influence. But I was the one who weakened them. We know. And you guys didn't let me have anything. We know. That seems unfair. We don't think so. Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia. And then in an incident that was maybe staged by the Japanese army, a bomb blew up a Japanese train in Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion and take over. So here's the situation.
So
what a
that's one thing about
manipulation.
even like strategic warfare. I won't relate it to any current wars going on. So before anyone tries to draw that conclusion on my behalf, don't do it. Is that sometimes it is the conspiracies of certain war tactics are in order to initiate friction that someone would bomb their own area in order to create the divide, to create the conflict of enough to create a siege if they need to, right? And I'm not saying that's in relation to anything currently going on. I'm not going to put no, don't put words in my mouth. Very clearly saying that right now. So just saying that is like something that's conspiracy, like using.
Wait, is something like that going on now?
So
I don't.
No, I'm not. Listen, I'm not going to judge you for not knowing current events because, like, again, they're just all really heavy, and a lot of people don't want to know them because it's just a lot to take in. So, like, I'm not here to judge you on that. I'll judge you on like you not knowing what a beaver is, right? Like, I'll judge you on that.
Beaver is. It's the stuff that two trees and build dams and stuff.
Yeah, like so, like I'll tease you about stuff like that. But like, if you don't know about current events, that's fine. There's a current stuff going on in Gaza, with also recently, but also ended very, very quickly, was the stuff with Pakistan and India again, which
Oh yeah, I did know about that one. Yeah.
which it ended very quickly in comparison.
Oh, that's ended now?
I mean, it barely even started. It was very, very brief, but the tensions are incredibly high politically. So it's
Right.
and you know, India's prime minister's a fucking cunt, so you know, it's a little weird right now. He is. If I could tell you about the allegations against him, it is
Crazy
insane.
shit.
Oh my god, the rants I have about him. My mom and I just talk the most shit about him. It's terrible. Anyways, my mom's Indian for those of you who don't know. So we talk a lot about the prime minister there. Anyway, so yeah, and I feel like at some point actually I would love to go through like what's going on like with in Gaza. And look at the Palestinians in general as well. And I feel like it's good for you guys to like learn about currently going on there because it's just majorly impacted the rest of the world as well. Like it's not just isolated to them at this point. So
I know about like general stuff with Gaza, but nothing more than that. That's it.
yeah, I think that's fair too, because it's sometimes like just very overwhelming with how many updates there are that like so much information can end up not letting you absorb enough, right?
Yeah, just seeing pictures of like literally a place not existing. It's just fully rubble as far as you can see, is horrific.
Yeah. And then there's also like, the Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
And that's only happening because Russia was like, yo, Crimea, yoink, right? And then they were like, oh, cool, Ukraine, yoink. And then Ukraine's like, not yoink, right? And that's currently going on. But Don, do you know about any of these or no?
Yeah, I know about the Russian and Ukraine war.
Okay. Yeah. So like stuff like that's still having like major issues right now. So like a lot of them, yeah, the casualties are just insane. And the wars that, yeah, it's just, I care a lot about civilian lives in general. It's just really sad what's currently going on. Anyway, we will get back into these wars though.
I'm surprised Japan was able to like take over that much. I don't think Japan would have that many people, you know?
The thing is you're thinking about modern day Japan. In Japan,
They were
modern,
insane back in the day.
so modern day
Didn't they
Japan,
used to? Sorry, go on.
sorry, modern day Japan completely is collapsed ever since they've been hit by 2 nukes, right?
Makes sense.
And they were reset so far back and their population so like deceased after that what we have today, Japan, even though it's thriving technically, did you know that their currency is one of the weaker currencies and that they cause so much inflation? They just keep inflating it over and over again. That's why every year you go to Japan or ever travel there, you'll always find that your currency is stronger and stronger there because they're just keep inflating it. And they're not letting it crash. They're just keep inflating it.
That shit was so cheap.
Yeah, when we went to Japan, we knew
It was like half price.
Yeah, it was very, very cheap.
It's gonna keep getting like that more and more, like as time goes on, because of how they pump money into their economy. It's not sustainable, but they don't let their economic bubble pop, so it just keeps going. But yeah. Anyway, so you're thinking of modern day Japan, which I totally understand, would feel like, how the fuck are they doing that? But old Japan kind of different. And what Korea went through really messed up. So Korea and Japan have a very long feud of history, right? But at the same time, right, it's kind of like the same thing with India and Pakistan. When Pakistan's like split, no one really in modern generations holds it against each other because everyone's like, yeah, whatever. Like we all move on. We're all like normal people, right? So it's like modern generations don't really hold it against each other. But same thing with like Korea and Japan. But people do hold a lot of respect for what happened towards their ancestry and towards their heritage. Because it's not that many generations ago. This did not happen that long ago in consideration, right? So.
Was that,
Nazi Germany, fascist
sorry.
The Johnny Somali video that we watched, was there some of that? Is it like because he was disrespecting that stuff, or is it?
Yeah. So what happened was that there's things called comfort women, and he was disrespecting those statues, and those are like women who were like seized and R-worded.
Oh.
In order to literally comfort soldiers. That's what they're called, comfort women, because they're literally taken and R-worded. So he was doing that on those statues, knowing what they were, because he was informed of it and still did it anyways after.
What a guy.
Yeah. So, yep. Terrible human being, Johnny Somali. Let's continue.
And Japan all believe they're racially superior, all feel hostility towards the Allies, and all want to militarize and take over more stuff. And so they did. Let's start with Germany. Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles, and now he was ready to begin undoing it. In complete violation of the treaty, the first Luftwaffe squadrons were set up, conscription was introduced, and he pimped up his army. The Allies did nothing.
The pimp my ride guy, oh hell no.
Demilitarized Rhineland, giving orders to immediately retreat if the Allies showed up. The Allies did nothing. With his military re-strengthened, he could now move on to step 2. He wanted to rapidly increase the Aryan population, and to do so, he needed Lebensraum, or in other words, he would have to take over the world. But for now, a good portion of Europe would do, and he began eyeing up his neighbors. The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little something like this. Hitler would say, I want that thing, and the Allies would say, you can't have that thing. Okay, you can have that thing, but no more. I want that thing. And repeat. In 1938, Hitler's army marched into Austria and just took it, with no resistance. Boom, this is Germany now. Next, he demanded to be given the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia with many ethnic Germans. The Allies held a meeting with Hitler in Munich and said, look, we're going to give you what... Hang on, this meeting is about my territory. Shouldn't I come to the meeting too? Anyway, we're going to give you what you want. Really? Yeah. Just like that? Yep. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving his signed piece of paper in the air, declaring crisis to be averted.
I did it!
Continuation of war and peace, and we built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor, and every day on the 30th of September we celebrate Chamberlain Day. Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. Yeah, he's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. You lied to me. What do you expect? I'm Hitler. Not to be outdone, Mussolini also wanted to get in on the action. He thought to himself, isn't there a not yet colonized nation somewhere which is so underdeveloped that the people would be defending themselves against our tanks with literal bows and arrows and wooden spears? Oh, there is? Fantastic. And so he took it. Italy also wanted to control the entrance to the Adriatic Sea, so they occupied Albania. Then, in another incident which was maybe staged by the Japanese, gunfire was exchanged by Japanese and Chinese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge, and the Japanese launched yet another invasion against China. They swept through Beijing and Shanghai, and then advanced through the Yangtze Valley to China's then capital, Nanking. It was here that saw the worst of Japan's shocking atrocities committed against the Chinese people. Back in Europe, Germany and Italy made their relationship status official.
Is this why
by
Japan
signing the
changed the
Pact of
flag?
Steel. Then Hitler turned.
Oh, like the Rising Sun stuff, the flag.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure about flag history, so I'm not 100% sure for that.
I just saw the flag they used in the video was the Rising Sun one. That's
Yeah, I don't recall anything about like when flags changed, to be honest.
Alrighty.
Just actually, if they talk about post World War II, I'll talk about some stuff, but we'll see what happens. Let's
turned his
continue.
eyes towards Poland and the hated Polish corridor splitting Germany in two. At this point, the Allies really had to put their foot down, and they warned him that an invasion of Poland would mean war. Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts. So for now, he made an alliance with Stalin, saying, "How about we both invade Poland and split it between the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future." Sounds good. This new alliance stung the West. On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two giants crashing down on them from either side.
Yeah,
Then came a
makes
period
sense.
known as the Phony War, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. The French had launched a small invasion into the Saarland, but they maintained mostly defensive positions, and after a while decided to just turn around and call it a day. Speaking of France, the French were still super proud of their victory in World War I, and they hadn't really moved on from it. They still used horses, they dispatched messages by motorbike instead of using radio, orders from the commander-in-chief were usually pretty vague, and the troops were rarely inspected. They built a line of defenses along their German border, but didn't bother extending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy.
What?
And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically. Instead of bombing raids, the RAF dropped propaganda leaflets over German cities, which one air marshal said likely did nothing but provide the continent with toilet paper for the duration of the war. They also only sent 200,000 men to France, while the French had mobilized millions. Both Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat of the First World War, and so they wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible. So they turned their eyes north, towards Norway. Neutral Sweden was exporting iron ore to Germany through neutral Norway, so the Allies asked them if they could please stop exporting iron ore to Germany, but this request was refused. Then the Soviet Union attacked Finland. So the Allies said, "How about we land troops in Norway and move them across Sweden to go help out your good pal Finland, and along the way maybe take control of all your arm fields?" But Norway and Sweden still said no. So the UK mined the waters around Norway to force any transport ships into international waters, and they also attacked a German tanker they found in the area. Hitler realized what the Allies were up to, and he quickly moved to secure his supply of iron ore. He launched an invasion through Denmark into Norway. The Allies rushed to land troops at key ports along the coast, but Germany had taken control of Norway's airfield, and their air superiority decided the fight. The Allies had to retreat.
Wow.
After this slightly embarrassing failure, Chamberlain resigned and was replaced with Winston Churchill, who had a slightly different approach to dealing with the Germans. Hitler's overall strategy was similar to Germany's First World War strategy. Attack France, defeat France, knocking out the UK in the process, then turn on the Soviet Union and win the war. During the Phony War, the Allies had given Hitler time to prepare his forces. Now, he was ready to attack. The Allies had wanted to place troops in Belgium, but Belgium had refused, and in a move that surprised pretty much no one, Hitler launched an invasion to get around France's defenses. The Allies charged into Belgium at full speed to meet the German invasion head-on, and it looked like a repeat of the First World War was coming. But this time, Hitler had a trick up his sleeve. Blitzkrieg. As the Germans advanced, they sent thousands of refugees westward, slowing down the Allies. Then, to the south, the French had left the Ardennes, an area full of hills and forests, pretty underdefended because they thought it was naturally impenetrable. Well, the Germans were about to penetrate it with everything they had. They smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions through and encircled the Allied armies at lightning speed. The best of the Allied forces were now trapped. The Germans squeezed in from all sides, taking out France's best armies and nearly wiping out the British too. But they managed to make a desperate last-minute escape at Dunkirk, with British civilian ships even making the perilous journey to bring their young men home. With most of the French forces depleted, the Germans breezed through, taking Paris, and France fell. What the Germans couldn't do in World War I, Hitler had done just like that. Hitler hoped that with the fall of France, the UK would also lose hope and sue for peace. But quite annoyingly, it didn't, and he needed to secure the Western Front, so he tried to force them into submission with...
One thing to mention, by the way, for Germany at this time, in case you didn't know, there is a pretty big difference between those who were part of the party and wanted to serve the party as Nazis versus Germans who were serving as soldiers. Though they were all implemented to do same actions, right? Was that some were forced to be soldiers as German soldiers, and some were willingly a part of like wanting to be part of the Nazi party, right?
Right. Okay.
So it's like one thing to make sure that like it's kind of hard because people were like, oh, Germany at the time, but it's like there were a lot of people who just assimilated because the situation, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, not
If
everyone
you went
was like,
against them, would they just kill people at that point?
oh, you would be seen as a sympathizer.
Yeah, so it would just take you out. Yeah, fair.
Yeah, they could put you in a camp as well. Like it's one of those things too, where it's like if you're someone who was like harboring Jewish like persons or like trying to save them or type of thing, or didn't rat them out if you knew them, you could also be taken to camps as well. As a sympathizer. Yeah.
Mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that. First of all, just before France fell, Italy finally declared war on the Allies, making the UK's situation even worse. Next, instead of just occupying all of France, Hitler occupied the coastal areas for defense, but allowed France to continue its existence as a German puppet state. This way, it looked like the UK's old ally had decided to switch sides. Hitler also hoped that the UK wouldn't attack any of her old allies' navy bases or colonies in Africa, giving Hitler an extra line of defense to the south. But the UK made sure to respond to this by sailing down to France's navy base in Algeria and wrecking a bunch of ships. So have at it. Hitler then began laying down plans for an invasion of Great Britain. Before German troops could land on British soil, he would first need air and naval superiority across the Channel. Waves of German bombers came, while the completely outnumbered RAF worked bravely around the clock in an attempt to quell the German attacks. At first, the Luftwaffe targeted British ports and coastal facilities. Then it attacked RAF bases, crippling the RAF's ability to defend the nation. And it looked like Hitler's Great British invasion was coming. But then, Churchill ordered a small, pretty insignificant bombing raid over Berlin. It didn't do much damage, but Hitler was furious, and he immediately ordered the Luftwaffe to refocus its attacks on civilian targets in London. Children were sent off to the countryside, away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent trips to air raid shelters became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF breathing space to reorganize, so Hitler kind of shot himself in the foot there. Just the foot for now. Finally, the Luftwaffe sent one massive all-out attack on London, and the RAF successfully repelled it, destroying many of the German aircraft and placing air superiority firmly in British hands. Hitler's invasion had to be postponed, but the bombing of British cities continued for some time.
Oh, London did bit. Oh, UK did bits. All right, fair play. Good on them.
Stick around until the end of the video to learn how you can get an exclusive deal just for Oversimplified viewers.
Part 2!
So what else is happening? Well, when I said Britain was all alone, that wasn't entirely true. Many Commonwealth nations and other Allied colonies had joined the war in Britain's support. They would play a key role throughout the war, particularly in the African and Italian campaigns. On the Axis side, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the defensive tripartite pact, bringing their military alliance even closer together. The Soviet Union's war against Finland should have been an easy victory, but it became a humiliating struggle, and their military ineptitude was put on full display. In the end, they forced the Finns to sue for peace. Then, they continued their honorable campaign of pushing around much smaller countries by annexing the Baltic states and part of northern Romania. France's colonies in equatorial Africa were like, heck no, we aren't going to join the Germans, and they all pledged their allegiance to free France, except for Gabon, which had to be taken by military force. The Allies also tried to capture the strategic port of Dakar, but that ended in failure. Mussolini had seen Hitler's successes, and he thought now it was Italy's time to shine, so he tried to take British Somaliland, and that went pretty well. Then he tried to take Egypt, and that went less well. Then he tried to take Greece, and that went really badly. Churchill began referring to Italy as Europe's soft underbelly. He began favoring a military campaign from the south and started sending British troops to Greece. All of this had Hitler pretty concerned, and he moved to protect his southern flank. He had been getting friendly with Hungary and twisted their arm into signing the Tripartite Pact and joining the Axis powers. Romania was also eager to join for protection against the Soviet Union. The Tripartite Pact was designed to prevent any other countries from deciding to join the Allies, specifically Britain's old ally, the pesky United States of America. When war first broke out, American public opinion was strongly against joining in. In 1940, there was an election. The Republican candidate said, "I will not send any young Americans to die in Europe," and sitting President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "I will also not send any young Americans to die in Europe. Unless I have to, then I might." And Roosevelt won. Churchill asked him to join the war. Roosevelt said, "No can do, Winston, but you know what? Here, have some weapons." America began supplying the Allies with food and munitions, but there was one problem. German U-boats were sinking thousands of Allied supply ships in the Atlantic, including American ones. If the Germans could sever Britain's supply line, the UK would starve. Throughout the war, the Allies had to come up with better technology to fight the U-boats. Improved radar, aircraft with longer range, better weaponry and convoy tactics. At one point, a man even called a meeting and said, "Pykrete, you take some wood, you take some ice, you put them together, you get pykrete." And then he pulled out a gun and shot some wood and it shattered. And then he shot some pykrete and the bullet ricocheted off it and hit someone else in the conference room.
Damn.
God damn.
Then they tried to
I
make a
love
pipe
it. It's
through aircraft
crazy.
carriers. That idea was scrapped because that's a really dumb idea. In the end, Alan Turing and his team of codebreakers cracked Germany's Enigma code, and the U-boats gradually became less and less of a threat. Back in Africa, Britain decided to push Italy out of Egypt. Hey, that was pretty easy, so they kept going. Hitler realized he was going to have to finally step in and do something. He went to Bulgaria and Yugoslavia and said, hey, I'm going to move troops through you to get to Greece, so either join us or, be invaded. Bulgaria opted to join them. Yugoslavia opted to be invaded. Then Greece finally fell to the joint German-Italian invasion. The British had moved troops from North Africa to fight in Greece, which helped Rommel and his tank divisions push the British back to Egypt. And they could have kept going, but a small, mostly Australian force held out under siege for 8 months in Tobruk, denying the Germans a strategic port city and disrupting their supply line. Despite having some success in the Middle East, the British didn't seem like any real threat for now. Hey, Soviet Union, look out. With 3 million troops, Hitler launched the largest ground invasion in history, and Stalin was far from ready. Both Churchill and Roosevelt had warned him of an impending attack, but he dug his head in the sand, and the Soviets didn't stand a chance. Germany made staggering progress, with huge encircling movements capturing mind-boggling numbers of Russian troops. 250,000 at Bialystok, Minsk, 300,000 at Smolensk, nearly 700,000 at Kiev, and again at Vyazma and Bryansk. Leningrad was put under a siege that would last an insufferable 4 years. The invasion of Russia had been Hitler's main ideological goal from the beginning, and his hatred for the ethnic peoples there was now unleashed in all its fury. The Eastern Front of the Second World War was brutal for all that endured it. The Germans were now inside of Moscow, and that's it. It's all over. But then it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. Hitler had hoped the Soviets would give up before winter, but they kept fighting. His commanders came to him and said, can we please dig in for the winter and wait until spring? No. Keep going. But oil is literally freezing inside our vehicles. That's fine. Keep going. We're having to leave the corpses of our frozen horses by the side of the road so we can still find our way in the snowdrift.
You fucked up.
Perfectly normal. Keep going. Hitler hadn't given his millions of men winter clothing and supplies because he thought he really should have won by now. Then, Stalin called in troops from the Siberian front, specially trained to fight in the extreme cold, and the Germans were no match.
Boys.
They were now being pushed back. They had no choice but to dig in and wait for winter to end. Germany's victories were staggering, and Japan was eager not to miss the victory bus. Their war in China had come to a standstill, but they wanted to keep expanding their sphere of influence and getting those sweet, sweet raw materials. They began making plans to expand southward, but there was a problem. Southeast Asia was heavily colonized by America and Great Britain. It was also full of ocean. Ocean meant naval combat, and there was no way the Japanese Navy could stand up to the US and the UK. So they thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could destroy their navies before we begin our conquest? And so it was. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese launched a surprise air raid on the US Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor and inflicted a huge amount of damage. They also attacked British colonies in Southeast Asia.
I saw that click for you in your head. You're like, oh, Pearl Harbor, I know what that was. There you go, yeah.
Roosevelt had no choice but to declare war on Japan, and so did Churchill. Hitler then declared war on America, even though he totally didn't have to. The attack on Pearl Harbor seemed like a big Japanese victory, but they didn't attack any of the naval repair yards, fuel storage tanks, or the submarine base, meaning the Pacific Fleet would be up and running again pretty soon. In the meantime, though, the Japanese were able to begin their conquest. They took Guam, the Gilbert Islands, Wake Island, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. They forced Thailand to join them so they could march their troops through to Malaya. They swept through Singapore, North Borneo, the East Indies, New Guinea, the Solomons, and they were now threatening northern Australia and the borders of India. Japan's victory had been as staggering as the Germans, and it reinforced the Japanese idea that this was a divine war which they were destined to win. But the victories had been based on speed, not power, and power would eventually catch up with them.
Right.
For now, though, in all occupied nations, the people suffered. Persecution, forced labor, harsh punishments for any who spoke out against their occupiers. In Europe, the Nazis were rounding up ethnic minorities and other unwanted groups and individuals. In particular, millions of Jewish people would suffer through the terrible events of the Holocaust. Brave resistance movements rose up in defiance of their invaders, while the people held out for hope. And hope was coming. Winter was over, and Hitler could continue his push eastward. But this time, he switched up his strategy. He wanted to focus on the south. His plan was to cut off the Russian armies in the Caucasus, an area full of oil, and then invade the Caucasus and take all the oil. His forces moved across the north with ease, and Hitler got cocky. He rerouted the 4th Panzer Army south early, leaving the 6th Army to complete the encircling movement alone. To do so, the 6th Army had to reach and take the key Soviet city of Stalingrad. The Russians defended it fiercely, and Stalingrad saw some of the harshest fighting of the entire war. The Soviets held off the German advance for 5 months as they battled in the war-torn city, which bought them valuable time. When the Germans had first launched their invasion a year earlier, the Soviets had moved their factories to the east. Those factories had been building a butt-ton of tanks and aircraft and getting the Soviet army up to scratch. Now, it was ready. Stalin gathered his new and improved forces around the city, and in an attack that resembled Hitler's own encirclement tactics, they began surrounding the Sixth Army. Hitler's commanders came to him and said, "Hey, maybe we should retreat." But Hitler said, "No, you stay."
Every time, bro. What the?
Have a shot.
The entire Sixth Army was trapped and had to surrender. With complete air superiority, the Soviets started pushing westward. For Stalin, it was a resounding victory. For Hitler, an absolute catastrophe. Things also weren't looking too good for Hitler elsewhere. With America now in the war, Allied bombing over German cities reached devastating levels. In Africa, the British had pushed Rommel back again. Then they were pushed back again, and finally, after a decisive battle at El Alamein, and with American and British troops arriving in the west, the Germans and Italians were squeezed out of Africa. Japan was also already seeing its rapid success being turned around. They attempted to take the island of Midway, but the US Navy was ready for the attack, and they sank Japan's carrier. Actually, they sank a lot of them. It was a battle from which the Japanese Navy would never recover. British, Indian, and Chinese troops held the line in the harsh jungle terrain of Burma, and the Japanese suffered losses in the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. They began to realize they were not invincible. With the Axis out of Africa, the Allies had to decide their next move. Churchill still wanted to attack from the south, while the Americans preferred a full sea invasion in northern France. "All right," said the Americans, "we'll do it your way." Allied forces successfully landed in Sicily and began moving north. They also carried out bombing raids over Rome. The thing was, many of the people in Sicily had relatives living in America, and they greeted the American troops quite warmly. With the war reaching home territory, most Italians just weren't that into it, and Mussolini was suddenly very unpopular. He was voted out by his own fascist Grand Council and was toppled from power. Italy immediately began negotiations for surrender. Hitler wasn't surprised and had already sent reinforcements southward. In an operation he ironically called Operation Axis, German troops quickly disarmed Italian troops in the north. The Allies continued fighting the Germans up through Italy, but then winter set in, meaning mud, and everything slowed to a halt. "All right," said the Americans, "let's do it our way as well." Germany had made itself a lot of enemies, and millions of Allied troops had been gathering in England as factories worked around the clock producing the war material needed for a super crazy massive the likes of which the world has never seen before invasion of Europe. The Germans knew an Allied invasion would come, but they didn't know where it would land. Thanks to Allied deception tactics, they thought there was a pretty good chance it would come at Calais, but the Allies were really going to land in Normandy because it was less fortified and the beaches were nicer. Under the careful planning of General Eisenhower, the invasion that had been long in the making was just about ready to go. Just one thing was preventing the launch: the British weather. For a short while, everyone sat around waiting for a decent day, and then it came. On the night of June 5th, over 1,000 bombers took off and raided coastline defenses, while paratroopers were dropped inland in a bit of a chaotic operation, tasked with sabotaging defenses and capturing key bridges to stop any German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Early the next morning, the barrage came, as Allied ships fired a huge number of shells at the German fortifications, and then the landings. The Americans at Utah and Omaha, the British at Golden Sword, and the Canadians at Juneau. It was a tremendous struggle with a great loss of life, particularly at Omaha, but the Allied troops captured the beaches and the landings were a success. Then they began their movements inland. They took the port of Cherbourg and the city of Caen. The Americans moved south to capture Brittany. Then, in a massive disaster for the Germans, British and Canadian troops from the north and Americans from the south trapped the German 7th Army in a near wipeout encircling movement. In August, Allied troops landed in the south of France to little resistance. On one beach, all they found was a Frenchman handing out champagne. Paris was liberated, and the Germans were pushed out of France as the Allies entered Belgium. In the Far East, the Allies started to push the Japanese out of Burma, as the Americans launched a two-pronged offensive in the Pacific. In the south, General MacArthur led the push to liberate the Philippines, while General Nimitz oversaw the brutal island-hopping campaign. American forces had to make hard-fought landing after hard-fought landing on fiercely defended small islands as they moved steadily towards the Japanese mainland. The Japanese believed that the greatest thing a person could do was to die in battle, and the most dishonorable act was to surrender. As a result, they fought ferociously to the very end, and the closer the Americans got to the mainland, the more ferocious the resistance became. In February 1945, the Americans captured the island of Iwo Jima, and an intense firebombing campaign of Japan's wooden cities began. The Allies suffered some setbacks trying to liberate the Netherlands, but they were making progress and were now threatening the industrial heartland of Germany. Hitler's health, both mentally and physically, was rapidly deteriorating. Things were looking bad, and he was desperate. He said, "We need to turn this thing around, and I have just the trick. Remember a few years back when we blitzkrieged through the Ardennes and trapped the Allied forces in Belgium? Well, I'm going to do the exact same thing.
Just run it back.
Again." He gathered his forces and
run it back in terms of War of the Wild. I love it.
He managed to create quite a nice bulge. He also trapped some American forces in the Belgian town of Bastogne. The Germans sent the trapped Americans a message saying surrender or be annihilated. When it was read out to the commanding officer, he said, "They want to surrender? No, sir, they want us to surrender." Nuts! And that's what they sent off as their official reply. General Patton's Third Army then managed to break the siege from the southwest, and the Germans were pushed back. Hitler's last-ditch attempt had failed, and what followed was a total collapse of the German forces. The Allies pushed into Germany from both sides. The Soviet Union took Warsaw and kept pushing to Berlin. In his bunker, Hitler realized all hope was lost. Berlin fell, and with it, Hitler's dreams of a great German empire. Two of the Axis nations had been knocked out. One to go. The Americans began their assault on Okinawa,
That's when they bombed
the last
Japan.
island before they would reach the Japanese mainland.
Nuke, sorry.
The desperate Japanese fought hard, launching kamikaze attacks on the U.S. ships. The citizens of Okinawa suffered through the terrible fighting, but in 2 months, the island was captured. The Allies now had to make a choice. Either continue the devastating struggle up the Japanese mainland, or they could try to coerce the Japanese into surrendering now. In July, the first successful atomic bomb test took place in New Mexico, and the destructive weapon was ready for use. America and the UK were also seeing the Soviet Union not so much liberating as occupying its captured territories, and so they wanted to put on a show of force. On August 6th, the A-bomb fell on Hiroshima. Then, on the 9th, Nagasaki.
Damn.
The cities were reduced to rubble, and for the people living there, it was a terrible fate. But for the Allies, it achieved their main aim. In September, the Emperor announced Japan's surrender, saying the war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. After 6 years, war was finally over. The Allies occupied Japan for...
The thing about that too was that like even after like the atomic bombs hit was that the radiation stayed in the air for so long that even when people were trying to recover bodies, they were getting like completely like just deteriorating from radiation. It was like living with radiation is like basically impossible. When you get radiation exposure, you got like a year, like max. And back then, probably maybe like a week, maybe 2 at max.
Even less.
It's just exposure was just insane to deal with, and they just didn't have the hospital capacity or anything. It was just, and then there's bombings prior to all that, which caused them to already have a lack of infrastructure in certain areas. So you couldn't even outsource resources and help from different areas of Japan because it's already cooked in different areas. It was just, the whole entirety of Japan's economic wealth and status just dropped off the face of the earth. And that's the reason why you have Japan being what it is today, because it still suffers the effects of what happened after the atomic bombs. And that's the reason why the rest of the world is fucking terrified of ever dropping nukes. Yeah. Right? So everyone, like, nuclear, like, nukes, the nuclear, like, war of just escalation is what ends up happening. And everyone has a fuck ton of nukes now. And
yeah, which is insane.
the scary part is there's certain countries we don't know how many they have, and that's what makes it even more terrifying, right?
Because I also heard that the UK is stepping up in building more nukes as well. They're putting more money into military and stuff.
The thing is, too, is that there is also research into nuclear power, but then there was nuclear power plants that got destroyed in the early 2000s that caused everyone to kind of get sit back in that as well. So it's like, it's a lot. It's just, there's a lot when it comes to nuclear energy in general, because it's one of like the largest sources of energy you could possibly have for the world. But at the same time, it's like, it's so lethal. Like, it's insane. But yeah, and like the cooling systems for it are just, egregiously large amounts of like water and cooling. But yeah. When it comes to like all of this, was that some like fun facts about all of this stuff too was, remember when I mentioned kind of like, Japan did horrendous things? There's actually horrific war crimes in a lot of places, like Canada. Also committed a lot of war crimes.
Really?
Canada said, what's your Geneva suggestion? What kind of tortury doodles do we like to do? And degradation of body. Like, it's bad. It's fucking bad. And another thing was that actually post-World War II was that the US kind of was like, hey, y'all got some smart-ass scientists over there doing experimentation. Can we just like snag some of y'all?
Like the German ones and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, because German experimentation was at an all-time high during this time, right? They were finding new innovations in so many different areas, not just only torture, in many different areas, right? Because of their experimentation. Some of it was just psychobabble, right? Because they're trying to like genetically modify as much as they possibly could by blasting people with substances. A lot of them on meth and cocaine type drugs. Right? Any like amphetamine, Hitler in particular was fucking on so many drugs. If you ever see anything of him, he's always tweaking. Like, they don't really, no one ever talks about that, but that motherfucker was on some shit.
I think I saw like a clip on TikTok for just like him in the Olympics or something like that.
Yeah, bro.
Was that like a stadium?
Bro was just always, he like.
Yeah, he was just like tweaking and then like his eyes rolling back and shit, and he was just like.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of the time when people think of like war leaders, they think of like power and like assertion. But it's like a lot of these motherfuckers were just insane psychos tweaking,
Just
right?
fucked up tweaking
The
24/7.
thing is that they're charismatic enough to get to a point and have enough of a voice due to them being manipulative, right? Just manipulative bastards rising up to the top, as most politicians are. And then once they get in their comfy seat, they're like, hey, I'm already here. Let's go crazy.
Legit.
Yeah,
I
so
can't believe in this how much Japan did. I'm just still baffled at that. Sorry, I just keep going back to it. They took over that with very quick by the sounds of it.
yeah, I mean, like the thing that like is also like important too is when it came to China's like a closed off country, like in modern day, right? And the thing about China's like regrowth of infrastructure and wealth was done at such an incredibly fast rate because of the way they still hold themselves as their main resource, right? And it's something that the rest of the world, even America currently, which is just the dumbest thing in the world, they're like, if China can do that, we can do that too. Let's bring the factories here in America. And we're like, cool, who's gonna work them? And Americans like, more American jobs. And it's like, cool, so would you work in that? No.
No. Yeah.
Right? And that's what polling shows. Polling shows people wanting the factories to come to America, but the polling also shows that people don't want to work in the factories. So it's like, who do you want these jobs for if it's not for yourself, right? Anyways, so back in the day though, in the US, factory work would be able to provide for your family in a single income home. Right? So then times of war actually caused it so that women enter the workforce because a lot of men were out fighting. And that's when dual income became a major thing, right? But also the escalation in the job market being more saturated because women entered the workforce and they were also paid at a lower rate. So that's also an interesting part.
Yeah, true.
So anyways, that's a lot of that stuff on the side. So these are just kind of like flourishes that are happening around all of this happening. Like these are like what they're explaining is everything major, everything super major. I'm just telling you about like all the like little fun facts and tidbits that happened all around everywhere.
So like all the war crimes and stuff that like Germany did, all the crazy shit, was it all just mainly to Jewish people? Or like was that mainly where like the camps were and stuff? Or was
so
it
for the Holocaust
everywhere they
in
took
particular,
over?
right? The Holocaust in particular was like the massacre basically of 6 million Jewish persons, right? During this time period. And we have things like concentration camps, work camps, right? Things like that. And when it came to it, we had like moments like Kristallnacht, which was like the glass shattering, which was just insane. But one of the things in particular to kind of focus on was that it was the rounding up of Jewish persons who now had an identification system, right? So one of the things that like in modern day, you might notice this on resumes and on like questionnaires to get a job is they can no longer ask like your race, religion, things like that, right? Technically by law. Like those are supposed to be confidential in certain countries. Some of them are not always like that. And the reason being is because of protection of like that in particular in getting employment. But that wasn't always the case because technically in literally the early 1900s in general, actually 1950s and onwards especially, they were still very much going based on race. Anywho.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So, but anywho, it's like trying to show like the modern progression. Mind you, they're currently trying to build a database of people with autism in the US currently because RFK Jr. is one of the most dumb persons in the entire world. And he thinks that people with autism should be registered into the system as an official statistic, which means that you'd be classified as an autistic person to the government, which means people will get less tested and get less aid because they don't want to be classified. Yay. Which, anyways, going back to the main point.
He's trying to do that right now?
Currently right now.
Oh, wait,
currently,
is he the guy who got promoted by Trump or whatever?
Yeah, he's the guy who I told you about when it comes to... He's the one who said black people should not have gotten COVID treatment and injections until after everyone else did because they have higher constitutions. Anywho, we can... I got a lot of feelings and opinions. The laundry list of how much I hate RFK Jr. is just, it's so long. But anyways, super big tangent. I just, relating it to modern day things of, putting people on fucking lists. So now let's go back to what we're talking about when it comes to the Jewish persons, right? Was that we have people now being rounded up, put on lists, and now having an identification like patch, right? Have you ever seen like the Star of David, like the star patches that a lot of the Jewish people had to wear, right?
Rings a bell, but yeah.
Literally identification patch that people would have to wear or happen to have on their personal identification. This is something that actually occurred as well in the Rwandan genocide. Do you know about the Rwandan genocide?
I haven't heard of that, no.
Don?
No.
Okay. That's between two different like peoples, which was the Hutu and the Tutsi, and which they also had identification cards and systems because they literally could not tell the difference between each other, right? Same thing with the Jewish Jewish and the German persons. They could not tell the difference between each other most of the time. They were checking their badges and their IDs, right? So it's like this level of discrimination wasn't just about like, oh, you look different. That ableism happened a lot. Racism happened a lot during this time, but it was also just about being Puritans, right? And the way that it perpetuated was the hatred towards and the disgust towards Jewish people. Them being rounded up, and also some areas offering rewards for snitching and ratting out Jewish people to be rounded up as well.
Damn.
Okay. And I didn't want to interrupt anything of what they were saying, because what they're saying is like the timeline that is so in depth that I even learned a lot of stuff during that. That was crazy. So I was just kind of sitting there going, wee. And I was like, okay, I'll fill in stuff later. But yeah, so like just to make it a little bit more personable to understand like the people situation. Now, there are certain things like when it comes to like concentration camps themselves, like you might know like the biggest one is like Auschwitz, right? Like that's one of the ones that everyone kind of knows of when they hear about the Holocaust. And gas chambers and the way that like the camps worked themselves and alone was degrading. And you might also know that people who were in these camps were tattooed with numbers, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So everything to dehumanize them as much as possible. Now, the reason why I mentioned that in particular is to relate it to your current day media stuff you're watching. Right. So the reason that's like the one thing that's fun about watching the game, like something like Squid Game, right, is that it's about like sheer capitalism at its max, where you completely dehumanize them. Only they are referred to as their numbers, right?
Yeah.
No names, just numbers. And the same thing, the same level of dehumanizing is what happened to the Jewish people within that time, where they were only referred to as their number, right? They're stripped of their hair,
like,
their belongings,
pure
everything.
Thing that the whole like pure blood or like blonde hair, blue eyes.
So that's Aryan.
Where did that come from?
So
That was just his dream, right?
Okay.
That was his ultimate race he wanted.
So yeah, the
That's
Aryan.
crazy when he doesn't even like that. Like
No, yeah, he has brown hair, brown eyes. So yeah, he saw them as like genetically superior. So they would be the Aryans, which is like where that kind of comes into. But yeah, so like also just to keep in mind, we have like the difference between again like SS versus like, you know, German soldiers, and how technically a lot of them had to do the same thing, but some were there by choice supporting the Nazi party, which is a big fucking difference, right? And sometimes people will see like I think it's the Iron Eagle, which was like the German symbol of like their army, and associate it instantly with like the Nazi party. But in reality, it's not. It's the German military, but the German military was utilized. So it's kind of unfortunate, right? Because it's like a broad stroke, because yes, Germany was horrendous at the time, but it's not one of those situations where you can be like, oh, every German was horrendous. It's like,
Yeah.
there were some fucking horrendous people, don't get me wrong, right? Who were supporting this very openly, right? But it's also important to keep grounded in that situation where you can't generalize, because again, it is a Nazi party. It's all originated from this being a political sentiment, and always was political and stayed political. They just normalized what they were doing to people.
It's crazy how quickly it escalated as well. Like that man went to work.
Yeah.
It's actually mind-boggling. Like hearing about this and the scale of it and just the pace that it happened.
Yeah.
Is baffling.
He took over a lot of European countries. So Japan took over a lot as well. It's just like, fuck me.
Yeah, it's a lot. That's why like whenever you hear of people like Mussolini and Hitler and Stalin, and you know, people like joke about them and like, oh, like in like context of just like, you know, being brash and whatever, is that like our world history, again, this did not happen that long ago.
No.
Yeah, right?
So
really
it's
didn't.
like the world still suffers a lot from different things that happened during this time period that we kind of just tend to ignore, because we're like, it's history. But it's like, it's kind of low-key technically still modern history to a degree, right? And the aftermath of all of this was insane. And yeah. I mean,
when
genocide
did World War II end?
I guess like
I don't remember the exact date.
like 1945-ish, 19, somewhere around there. Are you typing or are you looking down at your phone? I can't tell.
I'm looking it up now. Yeah,
Okay.
1945, yeah.
Okay, cool.
May 8th.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, not even that long ago when you deep it. God damn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fuck me. All right, yeah.
The emperor was allowed to keep his position, but General MacArthur made sure this picture was printed in the Japanese press to display to the Japanese people that their emperor was not the divine, powerful being they had believed. Germany was divided between America, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union. In 1949, the Allied sectors were united into West Germany. The Second World War had been more terrible and destructive than the first. In its aftermath, two major superpowers with two very different ideologies had come out victorious, and the tension between the two of them would create a new kind of war. A very, very cold one. Wow, Churchill, that looks just like me.
Yep. So that will go into the Cold War, which is a fun, long, weird time.
That one I've heard literally nothing apart from the name.
There's a lot of fun, like smaller ones to learn about. By fun, I mean interesting. By the way, for anyone who's But yeah, I mean, the fact that you guys don't know about the Rwandan genocide, that one's crazy to learn about. Like, it is just, oh man,
The what genocide?
Mind changing.
Rwandan genocide. The way that it was documented so well was like just.
How long ago was it?
I don't know how many years it would technically be. Let's take a look.
Before or after World War II? After, right? Before, right?
Sounded like before.
For the Rwandan genocide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
After.
Oh, was it
Sorry.
after?
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the Rwandan genocide was like probably close to when I was born.
What?
Wait, read what? 1990s?
What?
1995? 96?
1994 is when it happened. I was born 96, but yeah.
That's the year I was born. Damn.
What the fuck? And I've never heard about this.
I never heard about it either.
Well, do you know why? Because it was involving black people.
Oh, that's why we never heard about it. That
Yep.
makes sense now. Okay, that makes sense.
And one insane part about the US, they were like, oh man, yo, thousands of people are dying. We should probably send help, right? All the other allied countries like, yeah, we totally should send help, right? US is like, yeah, 3 of our reporters died. Yeah, no, we're not helping. So anyway, thousands of more people died after that because the US was like, no. So very interesting to see US's reluctance. But yep, just the world is a crazy place. And the level of heartbreak about the Rwandan genocide, just because of like, again, it was so well documented. And like, they even had like recordings of like beheadings and like literally gutting people and stuff like that. And that's still like, you can still find that to this day. Like, it's just that accessible because again, 1990s, it's very easy to record these things. And the amount of photography of all this too. So it's one of the things I correlate heavily with like identification, where it's like, oh, I can literally not tell if you are a Hutu or a Tutsi. I'm going to look at your identification. Is like the same way I correlate it with, it came to a lot of Jewish persons who were literally, you could not tell and were still identifiable. Mind you, there are people who with heavily, because it's just like being Jewish is an ethno-religion, right? So it's like, it's an ethnicity and a religion at like the same time. So there are like prominent features and a lot of people who are Jewish that people tend to know of, right? Like racial stereotypes. It doesn't apply to everybody. So the people it doesn't apply to still get checked. That is enough of Alicia rambling and talking for the day. I appreciate you all. I look forward to our next video that we're covering. And for those of you guys in the comments, hi.
Just hi?
Hi. I hope your day's going good. I hope you enjoyed this long video. That's nice.
What's
you made it this far. Yeah, if you made it this far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you next time. BRB.